purpose of this video is to explain a little bit about the controls behavior within Solidworks, and I'm going to show you some easy shortcuts that will make manipulating your models and working on your project a little bit less painful and a little bit easier for you to pick up on. So one of the first things that is really important for using Solidworks is to make sure that you have a mouse with a scroll wheel on it. There's a lot of things that are frustrating and slow to try and do with a trackpad within SolidWorks. So getting yourself set up with a mouse with a scroll wheel is going to make your life much, much easier. And I'll show you a couple reasons why. So let me go over to my SolidWorks screen. So the scroll wheel does a bunch of things in combination with just using the scroll wheel and with some keyboard shortcuts. So obviously the first thing that the scroll wheel does when you scroll it back and forth is it zooms in and out on your part. And more than just zooming in and out on your part, it zooms into where the cursor is pointed. So if I point the cursor here and I want to take a look at this particular corner of this part that you made in the first SolidWorks tutorial that we did in the lab about a month ago, it makes it really easy to come in and look at certain parts of the model where you might want to put particular attention to detail. The next thing, obviously, that I'm sure you discovered already is if you press down on the scroll wheel and then drag the mouse around, that rotates the part. So that's one of the most used things that is really difficult to do on a trackpad without adding another key. So you can keep your hand on the keyboard and manipulate your model around to see the different features that you want. Another thing that's really convenient with the scroll wheel is if you find that you're way off to one side of the model, if you double press on the click wheel on the scroll wheel itself, it'll zoom the part to fit this window. So you can do that with the view bar by coming up here and clicking on the zoom to fit button. It does the same thing. It's just one of those shortcuts that I find myself using a lot. And it's particularly useful if you're in a really large or complicated model and you want to quickly get back to what you're looking at. The next thing, if I pull this keyboard up here, so if I'm within my model, if I just press on the scroll wheel and drag around, it'll rotate my part. If I hold Control while I press on the scroll wheel and drag the mouse around, it'll pan my part around. So that's also convenient for maybe larger or more complicated assemblies where you might want to be only looking at this side of a part during an inspection. And if I hold Control, it'll let me slide the part up within my view without moving it around rather than just rotating it like that. The next one is if you hold Shift and then press the wheel and scroll in and out. It also zooms, but what this does is it zooms to the center of the screen rather than to where the mouse is pointed, like it does if you just roll the scroll wheel back and forth. The next thing that I want to talk about is just the click behavior of the mouse. So if you come in and just single click, it'll let you pick features that you're going to work on. And one really convenient thing is if you come over to the feature tree, and if you double click on the feature, on different features on your model, it'll show you all the dimensions that are building up that particular feature. So on this first initial square base that we made for this part, if I double click on it, it'll show me what the dimensions were. It'll show me how deep we extruded it to make that feature, but it will also let you come in. If you double click on these dimensions, you can edit them without having to go into the sketch and back out and create the feature. So if I was going to make this feature instead of 120 millimeters, if I key in 150 and then rebuild the model, now that dimension has changed without otherwise having to go into sketch, edit sketch, then change the dimension here back to 120, and then exit sketch, and then everything comes together. You can do everything without having to go into your individual sketches, which is really convenient. The next thing on the feature tree that's really good to know about is if you slow double click on all of the features, it will let you, if that works correctly, it will let you edit the name of all these features. So if you look at what I've got mine titled as here, they're all descriptive names of different parts of the model, so I can quickly glance at it and know what I'm going to edit. If I knew I wanted to edit the hole in the middle, it's easier to look at than just, for example, fillet 1, fillet 2, fillet 3 that it shows up. So it's really good habit to get into. As you start building your features, name them as you go. It'll make it easier to look at your model. For simple parts like this, it's not as big a deal, but when you find yourself getting into much more complicated parts with a lot more features and a really long feature tree, it'll make it really easy to, for example, find if I wanted to edit, just the height of these posts that hold my PCBs onto this board, it'll let me quickly come in and change those and rebuild the model. And now I've not had to search through and figure out what I wanted to change. So one of the interesting things about SolidWorks selection behavior is if you click and drag the mouse, you get this selection box. And depending on which direction you drag the mouse after you start the selection box, actually changes the selection behavior. So you'll notice if I come in and click and drag the box over to the right, the box is blue. If I drag the box over to the left, the box is green. So if you click and drag over towards the right, the selection box will only select entities that are completely within that box. So if I come over here and release the box, I've selected and turned light blue this line on the left of the square, but where the box overlaps these top and bottom lines, it doesn't do anything. If I do the opposite and come in and click and drag to the left, it'll select everything that lies partially within that box. So now I've got these 3 lines. If I come in and just get this corner, it'll give me those 2 lines that were partially overlapped by the rectangle. If I do the same thing over here, nothing happens because none of these entities lie completely within the box. So that's one thing that makes it convenient to select different parts. You can also select individual entities and hold the control key like you do in a file explorer, and it'll do the same thing. It'll let you select multiple things at once, and that's really convenient if, for example, you are going to make a bunch of circles and do something like make all of them the same size, right? So now all of these will change together. If I only wanted if I only wanted those 2 circles, you can do things like that. I think that covers everything I wanted to do about the mouse. There is one behavior that you might find yourself stuck in where, if, for example, you were trying to create a sketch on a particular face or plane or something like that, and you find that if you go and click on it, you can't actually select what you wanted. If you look at the bottom here, I've got this bar open of filters. And to get the filters bar open and close, you push F5 on the keyboard. You can also go up into tools and turn on the filters bar. So the filters bar will let you do things like only select faces or edges or reference geometry so that you can quickly come into a model and select only particular features that you want. But if a filter accidentally gets turned on, for example, if I wanted to create a sketch on that face and I have accidentally turned on to filter only letting me select edges, so this filter icon comes on as this little purple icon next to the cursor. So right now it's set to only let me select edges. So if I come over and click on this face, nothing happens, no matter how many times you pick on it, but it'll only let you do the edges of parts. So if for some reason you find yourself unable to do that, it's possible a filter got turned on accidentally. So make sure those are all turned off, and then you can come in and select what you want again. The next thing I want to quickly talk about is, since SolidWorks has a pretty overwhelming number of features, you will find that you will be using a pretty small number of them very often, and SolidWorks has a really convenient way set up so that you can assign keyboard shortcuts to your commonly used features. And I'm going to put this list underneath this video of a starting point of ones that I use that I find helpful and make it quicker for me to design my models. So if you're going to assign keyboard shortcuts, you're going to go up to the top and go to Tools, and then Customize here at the bottom. And in the Customize menu, you have this keyboard tab. So if I go to the keyboard tab, in this list are all of the different functions that are built in within SolidWorks. And I like to do things like assign, for example, if I wanted to measure something, that's something I use a lot. If you search for measure, I've got measure assigned keyboard shortcut to M. So yours is probably going to be blank. So if you come in and you want to assign a command to a keyboard shortcut, you click on the keyboard shortcut and then hit the key that you want, and it'll show up here as M for measure. And M for measure brings up this measure box. And if I wanted to know how wide my block was, I can do that and show up, it's 120 millimeters. And you use that a lot for especially more complicated things. For this box, I don't necessarily want to make it hard for myself to find how wide the box is. But for example, in something more complicated, what if I needed to know the distance from like the end of this PC board to this bulkhead for some reason? So once I'm out of that, if I don't have it set for my keyboard to just hit M for measure, go ahead and do that. I've got to go Tools, and then down to Evaluate, and then find Measure, and now you've got a whole bunch of mouse clicks to get to something like that. So some of the other keyboard shortcuts that I use a lot that make it easy to do your model is I have N assigned for bringing the view normal to a feature. So if I click on this face and push N, it'll make my view perpendicular to that face. Same thing with there, which makes it really easy to hit S for sketch. And now, for some reason, sketch is not working, so I'll have to go in and fix that. So like if you bring a sketch in on here, the other ones that I use a lot are if you're going to draw lines or circles or arcs or something like that. So I've got L for line. I'll start drawing my line. Let's make a box with a curved top on it. So I'll draw the three of those. Now I'm in here for line, escape, 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 get out of that. A for arc. I've quickly got an arc. And say I wanted another circular feature on here. So I go B for circle, brings up circle. I can draw it on there, exit the sketch. And now I'm going to go E for extruded boss. I'm going to pick this sketch that I just made and extrude it onto the edge of my part, and we're done. So when you're going to like rebuild that part, rather than going through the way the tutorial told you to go, if you go extrude, and then I go rectangle, and then D for dimension is another one that you're going to use a ton. I've got 120 by 120 millimeters. Then I come out of that and do my 50 millimeters deep. And I'm going to go another extrusion on that face. And for normal, I'm putting a circle in the center of here. So we're going to go C for circle, D for dimension. Let you pop all of those in there much quicker than going through menus at the top. And it just makes it a little bit more intuitive and a little bit less cryptic about how to go about building what you're working on. So hopefully that was helpful. I'll put this list up for you to find. And next, we're going to talk about the next assembly tutorial that you're going to do, where you're going to learn a little bit about how to take multiple components within your SolidWorks environment and put them together to build up an assembly. And we will start that soon.